I never expected the sound of silence to be the loudest thing in the room on the day I wore white. The mirror in front of me reflected everything I thought this moment would feel like: perfectly arranged curls framing my face, my mother's vintage earrings glinting under soft vanity lights, and a wedding dress so beautiful it made the air around me feel heavier with promise. I looked like a bride. I looked like a woman standing on the threshold of a life she had clawed and scraped and dreamed her way toward. And yet, behind the mirrored perfection of that moment, something was already cracking. It would take less than 30 minutes for the entire illusion to collapse in a symphony of betrayal I never saw coming. It started small. Isn't that always how these things start? One of my bridesmaids, sweet, soft-voiced Lila, who always looked like she wanted to disappear during family events, walked into the bridal suite holding her phone like it was ticking. She didn't say anything at first, but her eyes flitted toward me, then to the floor, then back to the phone. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, "Madison, I think something's wrong with your mom." Wrong with my mom? I almost laughed. That was not new. Still, I turned from the mirror and asked, what happened? Did she forget something again? My mother had a long track record of either forgetting or dramatically overemphasizing minor inconveniences. I wouldn't be surprised if this time it was the wrong shoes or some imagined offense about floral arrangements. But Lila didn't laugh. She hesitated for a beat too long, then said, "She's refusing to walk you down the aisle." I blinked. What? She's sitting outside the suite. Said she won't walk you down. She said she won't be part of a wedding she doesn't believe in. Believe in? Before I could ask what that meant, another bridesmaid, Tori this time, always practical to the point of coldness, pushed the door open and added, "Your dad won't get out of the car. He's parked at the far end of the lot." The ushers tried to get him to come inside, but he just waved them off. I froze. In the mirror, I watched my expression drain of color. What the hell was going on? I stepped into the hallway, my veil fluttering behind me like some cruel joke of innocence, and I started walking faster than I probably should have in 5-inch heels and tight satin. My heart was thundering in my chest, louder than the string quartet warming up near the front of the church. As I turned the corner, I saw them, my mother sitting on the edge of a velvet bench, arms crossed and expression tight, and my father still visible through the stained glass entrance, slumped behind the steering wheel of his car. "Mom," I snapped, "what is going on?" She looked at me, and for a second, I swore I saw pity in her eyes. But it wasn't for me, it was for herself. "You should go talk to your sister," she said instead. "She's waiting for you at the entrance." "My sister?" I asked, now beyond confused. "Marissa flew in yesterday. She's supposed to be sitting third row. Why would I need to?" "She's not sitting," my mother interrupted, voice sharp like broken glass. "She's standing, waiting, and wearing black." The word slammed into me. Black. I turned without another word and marched down the corridor of the church, 1,000 thoughts tumbling over each other like panicked children in a burning building. Black? Standing? Why was Marissa waiting for me in black? As I approached the main entrance, I saw the pews, dozens of them, half empty. The right side, filled with my fiancé's family and friends, looked like a wedding should. Excitement, nerves, whispered conversations, and tissue-dabbing mothers. But the left side, the side reserved for my family, looked like an abandoned movie set. Pews that should have been filled with cousins, uncles, aunts, childhood friends, empty. As though someone had announced this was a wake, not a wedding. And then I saw her. Marissa. My sister. In mourning black. Standing at the front of the aisle, not sitting where she should have been. Her lips were painted in a shade far too dark for the occasion, her eyes rimmed with thick kohl, and in her hands, trembling ever so slightly, was a folded piece of paper. As soon as she saw me, she stepped forward. The silence in the church buzzed into awareness. Conversations stopped. Even the quartet's tuning faltered. "You don't deserve to stand there," she said, voice carrying like a dagger in a cathedral. Not when you've slept with my husband. The sound that followed wasn't a gasp, it was an explosion. The oxygen in the church seemed to vanish. My ears rang. And somewhere, across the sea of shocked faces and horrified murmurs, I saw my fiancé, Thomas, his expression not one of surprise, but one of disbelief and calculation. "No," I said. My voice was barely audible. "That's not true." "She slept with him," Marissa repeated, louder now, as if daring the walls to echo her. I found the texts. The pictures. I heard the voicemails. "You said it was a mistake, Madison, but you never denied it. And you still expected me to come here and clap like a puppet." My throat closed up. I tried to take a step forward, but it felt like the ground beneath me had turned to molasses. My legs wouldn't move. My voice wouldn't rise. And as the silence folded in again, thicker this time, heavier, judgmental, I saw Thomas take a small step back. Away from me. The officiant, unsure of what to do, fumbled with his notes. My best friend's mouth hung open. Someone in the crowd dropped a program. A flutter of it echoed across the stone floor like a dying bird. I didn't do this, I tried again. But this time, not even I believed it. Because truth no longer mattered. The moment was over. My wedding was over. No one came to me. No one took my hand or stood beside me or said, "Let's talk about this." I was a ghost in white. I had walked out of the bridal suite as a bride-to-be, and I now stood in front of the altar as a woman condemned. Condemned by silence. Condemned by timing. Condemned by a sister whose grief, anger, and performance had been choreographed like a eulogy. And all I could do was stand there, heart-shattering in increments, while the man I loved walked away. While the sister I thought I'd forgiven turned away. While my mother stood like a stone, and my father never left the car. My name is Madison. And this is the story of how everything I thought was mine, my love, my family, my future, was stolen in one brutal breath. I learned that time doesn't heal all wounds. Sometimes it sharpens them, refines them into something far more dangerous. Something surgical. In the early days after the wedding, that day I refused to call my wedding, I didn't scream. I didn't storm into rooms demanding people listen. I didn't track down Thomas or Marissa or either of my useless parents to plead for answers or redemption. I did something far more powerful. I disappeared. Not in the way cowards run or heartbreak hides. I vanished like a storm cloud building at the edge of a horizon, quiet, watchful, charged with a vengeance not ready to strike just yet. I moved without notice. Changed cities. Deleted accounts. Changed my phone number and left the ring in a hotel room in New Mexico I don't even remember checking out of. I traded my name for initials on leases and legal documents. People don't ask many questions when you pay in full and tip in silence. I wasn't hiding from the world. I was shielding the world from the woman I was about to become. For a year, I worked under aliases, cleaning up social media leaks for mid-tier influencers who cheated on their brands and brand ambassadors who cheated on their wives. It was ironic, I suppose. Erasing the digital dirt of people far less clever than they thought they were. I scrubbed secrets for those who'd never understand the cost of truth. But I watched. I learned. I became obsessed with the way lies leave footprints. Digital footprints. Tiny, careless clues left by people who think erasing a text deletes the truth. But no one ever really deletes anything. Not if you know where to look. And I did. I enrolled, quietly, in a digital forensics certification program. Spent my nights poring over metadata analysis and version tracking systems. I learned how to trace a screenshot back to the exact model of the phone that captured it. I studied emotional abuse cycles, online manipulation, social engineering tactics. Every headline about revenge porn or digital gaslighting became my homework. I absorbed it all. Like a woman with unfinished business. Like a woman preparing to drag the truth into daylight one line of code at a time. I wasn't preparing to ruin anyone. I was preparing to set the record straight. Ruin was just the consequence of that honesty. And then it happened. One night, Almost 3 years after the destruction of my life had played out under the crucifix of that damn church, I came across a digital fragment I wasn't meant to find. A forgotten shared drive, one Marissa had linked to an old wedding planning site we had used together. I had all but forgotten it existed, but it was still there, untouched, and more importantly, sloppily synced with her primary Google account. The file was called Reception Final, but the metadata told a different story. It had been modified 1 week before the wedding. Not by her. By someone using her login credentials, but from a different IP address, one tied to a house 2 towns over. Not her home. Not her husband's. I downloaded everything. Every file. Every login. Every scrap of corrupted document data. I didn't have the whole picture yet, but I had a piece of the frame. That was all I needed to keep digging. Because here's what no one tells you about exile. It teaches you how to operate without the applause. I stayed out of sight. For years. When my parents threw birthdays for the grandchildren I would never have, I stayed silent. When Marissa posted photos of her healing journey and therapy selfies in her signature performative black and white filters, I stayed still. I let them forget my voice so they wouldn't recognize it when I came back speaking fluently in revenge. Then came the invitation. Cream envelope. Wax seal. Custom calligraphy. I almost laughed when I opened it. Mark and Helen Wilkins cordially invite you to join them in celebrating 40 years of love, legacy, and family. I nearly choked on the word family. The real punchline was at the bottom. Keynote speech by Marissa Wilkinstone. Because of course it was. That wasn't just a party invitation. That was a flare shot into the sky. A perfect, glimmering opportunity to bring the truth to the surface. I wasn't going to crash their party. I was going to burn their fiction to the ground, and I'd make sure everyone arrived early for the show. But first, I needed the final proof. I started cross-referencing timestamps. The supposed emails Marissa had forwarded to my mother, the ones that proved I had an affair with her husband, were nowhere to be found in my sent folder, my drafts, or any cached directory I could access. That didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me was the font. The email she had printed and shown around during the post-wedding fallout had the wrong font. Not just a different style, an entirely incorrect formatting structure inconsistent with my account's settings. Amateurs fake emails all the time. Professionals forget that Gmail defaults aren't universal. She had copied a message, pasted it, altered it, forged it, and printed it out with a fabricated sent timestamp, one that fell during a week when I wasn't even in town. But here's where it got nuclear. Through a subpoena request from a journalist friend who owed me a favor, I obtained access logs from the email provider. The message, the one she claimed came from me, had been created from a different IP address entirely. Not mine. Not Thomas's. But hers. She forged the entire thing. And she hadn't just done it to punish me. She had done it to distract everyone from the truth. Marissa and her husband were already in the middle of a separation proceeding when she destroyed my life. She had filed divorce paperwork 10 days before the wedding and had it temporarily sealed by a sympathetic judge because the family was going through a joyous event. The marriage had been dead long before the rehearsal dinner. I dug further. I found bank transactions that proved Marissa had rented a luxury condo under a maiden alias 2 months before the wedding. I found encrypted texts between her and a man who was not Thomas, messages so sexually explicit they made me wince, not from the content, but from the arrogant certainty that no one would ever uncover them. I backed it all up, printed hard copies, saved it to 5 different cloud locations, created a presentation so surgically precise it would make a criminal attorney jealous, and then I RSVP'd to the party. Yes, I would attend. With +1. I didn't tell them who. That night, as I got ready, I didn't wear black. I wore red. Deep, unapologetic, blood-soaked red. The color of war. The color of truth when it's done hiding. I arrived 15 minutes early. My parents looked like they had seen a ghost. My mother clutched her pearls like she was auditioning for an antique drama. My father stood silent, as always. And Marissa, dear, trembling Marissa, looked me up and down as if I were a stain she hadn't planned for. "Didn't think you'd come," she murmured, already smiling for the photographers. "I always RSVP when something's being buried," I replied softly. The crowd gathered slowly. Extended family, family friends, neighbors, investors in my father's retired real estate projects, all smiling, all toasting, all oblivious. Until the lights dimmed and the stage was set for the keynote. Marissa adjusted her mic like she'd done this 1,000 times. I waited for her to say something inspirational about love, endurance, or sacrifice. But instead, she started talking about truth, family integrity, the importance of honesty, especially in the darkest of times. I had to laugh. So I did, loud enough for every head to turn. And then I walked to the edge of the stage, carrying a flash drive like it was a holy relic. "Marissa," I said calmly, my voice slicing through the ballroom air like a blade through silk. "Would you like to explain how a forged email helped you save face while divorcing a man you never loved?" The silence was instant. The kind of silence that ripples across generations. She laughed, of course she did, nervous, shrill, cracking at the edges. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" I raised my arm and pointed to the AV technician by the side of the room. "Play it." And he did, because I had paid him a week ago. The projection lit up. Side-by-side timestamps. Metadata readouts. IP addresses. A breakdown of the document manipulation. A pixelated shot of the metadata trail that tied Marissa's account to the forged messages. Then the divorce filing. The rental agreement. And finally, because cruelty must be elegant, the screenshots of her texts to the man she'd actually been sleeping with. The room imploded. My parents gasped. My aunt dropped a champagne glass. Marissa stood frozen, mouth opening and closing like a beached fish. "This," I said, turning to the crowd, "is what really happened. I didn't sleep with her husband. I never sent those emails. I was destroyed, publicly, systematically, and viciously, because she couldn't bear the embarrassment of her own failing marriage. No one applauded. No one needed to. The truth didn't need permission." As I turned to leave the stage, Marissa reached for me, her face wet, her voice cracked. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this. We're family." I leaned in close enough for only her to hear. "You made me your funeral. I'm just writing the obituary." Then I left. I didn't stay to see what happened next. I didn't have to, because sometimes justice doesn't come with handcuffs or headlines. Sometimes it arrives in the form of the quietest woman in the room, stepping back into the light, no longer asking to be believed, only demanding to be heard. And I promise you, this was only the beginning. There's a moment right before a storm breaks where everything seems impossibly still. The air thickens like it's choking on secrets. The world tightens, tenses, as though nature itself knows what's coming, and all it can do is brace for impact. That was the exact moment I walked into the room, heels clicking against polished hardwood, dress deliberate, expression unreadable, just as Marissa raised her glass and let the words I'd been waiting for slither from her mouth. "To family loyalty," she declared, her voice smooth as syrup and just as artificial. "To the people who show up, who hold us together, and who never betray what matters most." The glasses lifted in clumsy unison, though even from the doorway, I could feel the hollowness in the room's applause. Smiles held too long, nods too fast. No one was really listening. They were performing. They always were. Until they saw me. A single heel strike brought every conversation to a grinding halt. The sound of 100 forks freezing midair. The flutter of napkins suddenly dropped. You would have thought a ghost had entered, but no, it was just me. Madison, in flesh and truth, uninvited and unforgiving. I let the door shut behind me without flinching. No dramatic push, no trembling breath. Just presence, calculated, deliberate, and carrying the weight of 100 unspoken wounds now ready to bleed in public. Marissa's glass lowered a fraction. Her smile tightened. She didn't blink, but I saw the calculation begin behind her eyes. I watched her weigh the damage, recalibrate the narrative, rehearse the lie before she even knew what I'd come to say. She didn't know yet how deep I had dug. She didn't know the arsenal I had armed myself with. She just knew I wasn't here to celebrate. I walked slowly, letting every eye fall on me, letting them sit with their discomfort, letting them squirm in their collective silence as I moved toward the front of the room like the ghost of a better version of their conscience. My parents didn't move. My mother's grip on her wine glass tightened until her knuckles paled. My father shifted in his seat like the floor beneath him was no longer safe. Good. Let it burn. I stopped 10 feet from the stage, close enough to command, far enough to control, and turned to the crowd with the ease of someone who no longer needed to be invited to speak. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Before we toast loyalty, I said calmly, I think we should define what it looks like. A beat of stunned silence. Then a scattered rustle of whispers. And then the slow, creeping dread that this was not going to be another one of Marissa's curated photo op moments. I won't take long, I continued, pulling a folder from my side. I just thought, while we're celebrating family, it might be a good time to finally stop lying to one another. Marissa stepped forward, her voice a bit too loud, too cheery. Madison, we've already been over this. You weren't invited for a reason. This isn't the time. I didn't even glance at her. Instead, I opened the folder and held up a color-printed email. This, I said, is the email Marissa claimed I sent to her husband, the one she waved around to ruin my wedding, destroy my reputation, and convince our family I was a liar, a manipulator, and a homewrecker. I passed a copy to the nearest table. This, I said, pointing to the bottom, is the metadata proving it never came from me. Different IP address. Different timestamp. Different location entirely. I heard the first few gasps ripple across the crowd. I spent years digging into this, I continued. While most of you were sending holiday cards and reposting Marissa's inspirational captions about healing and forgiveness, I was learning how to track every keystroke, every document version, every IP bounce. I rebuilt every fake trail she laid. Marissa let out a dry laugh, but there was no amusement in it, just panic in disguise. Oh, please. You've clearly lost it. This is desperate. I turned to her, finally meeting her eyes. You know what desperation looks like? Fabricating a false affair to shift blame from your own. Because the truth is, Marissa wasn't a victim. She wasn't heartbroken. She was already divorcing her husband before my wedding. Quietly. Secretly. And to distract everyone, she forged my name into a nightmare. I held up the next page. This, I said, is the rental agreement for her new condo. Dated 2 months before my wedding. Signed under a pseudonym she's used since college. The same pseudonym attached to several hotel bookings under the name of the man she was actually sleeping with. The room cracked. And then, with the final nail, I pulled out a voice recorder. Pressed play. A man's voice. Clear. Unmistakable. This is Thomas Stone. I'm recording this voluntarily. I want to state, on record, that Madison never pursued or engaged in any romantic relationship with me. The narrative you heard from Marissa was false. She used my name, my phone, and several old messages from years ago to fabricate what she called evidence. She told me it was the only way to protect her reputation. I didn't agree. I wasn't even aware until after the damage was done. The room shattered. Chairs scraped. Someone dropped a wine glass. I could feel the tension burst like a dam cracking under too much pressure. Marissa's composure snapped. She lunged forward, snatching for the papers, the recorder, anything she could destroy. You don't get to do this. You don't get to twist everything. You were always the favorite. Her voice pitched higher, breaking in fury. Everyone always loved you more. You were perfect, Madison. You were the shiny one. The one with the good grades, the good hair, the goddamn smile. I had to fight for scraps. I had to claw my way through their indifference while you stood on pedestals built from compliments I never received. The room went silent again, but not for me this time. For her. Marissa, face red, mascara streaking, chest heaving in rage, had finally dropped the act. The golden daughter, the polished, curated, controlled favorite, was screaming in public, unraveling in the harsh light of a truth she could no longer manipulate. And I didn't say a word. Not for a moment. I just let the silence hold her. Let her drown in it. When I finally did speak, it wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The words were like lead. Heavy. Final. You destroyed my wedding to feel powerful, but I rebuilt everything you tried to take from me without lies. Marissa stood frozen, eyes darting, tears threatening, but no one moved to help her. Not my mother. Not my father. Not her carefully chosen audience of admiration. Her empire had collapsed in real time. The mask she had worn for decades now lay shattered on the marble floor of a hotel ballroom, soaked in silence. And then she ran. Not gracefully. Not with dignity. She ran the way a liar runs when the spotlight finally reaches the part they never rehearsed for. Out the side door. Past the guests. Past the legacy she had clawed and connived to maintain. She vanished. No one followed her. No one said her name. Not once. And I didn't need to gloat. Because victory doesn't require volume. It doesn't need confetti or applause. Sometimes, the most powerful thing in the world is standing upright while someone who buried you runs from the truth you built in silence. The crowd stood still. No one cheered. But eyes turned toward me, some in shame, some in awe, some in quiet regret. My mother finally rose. Trembling. Pale. I didn't know, she whispered. I looked at her with the steadiness of someone who no longer needed their mother's validation. But you believed it anyway. And then I turned and walked out. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just free. Because truth doesn't ask for company. It simply stands. And I have never stood taller than I did that day. Forgiveness is not the same as a reset button. It is not an invitation. It is not a permission slip back into my life. And it damn sure isn't a reward for survival that wasn't theirs to endure in the first place. I walked out of that ballroom with a posture carved from everything they tried to take from me. Every step I took toward the exit felt like reclaiming a decade of silence, like peeling their judgment off my skin one unshaken breath at a time. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. You don't pause to wave at the fire after walking out of the building it tried to burn you alive inside. Outside the venue, the night air was cool against my face, soothing in a way I hadn't felt since before that church door slammed behind me all those years ago. I remember thinking, as the cold settled against my skin, how ironic it was that the world never changed for any of the pain we carry. The wind doesn't pause for betrayal. The sky doesn't darken to match your grief. You walk outside, and the air just moves around you like it always did. But this time, I wasn't walking out alone. At the edge of the parking lot, under the warm yellow spill of an old street lamp, I saw them, my real people. Not the ones I shared blood with, but the ones who had seen me wrecked, unwashed, paranoid, teeth gritted through panic attacks and injustice, and still chosen to stay. Lila was the first to spot me, her arm raised in a half-wave, half-check-in gesture. She didn't ask what happened inside. She didn't need to. She knew I wouldn't have walked out if it hadn't already been burned to the ground. Behind her stood Dev, my ex-roommate turned emergency contact turned accidental brother figure, with his usual smirk that covered concern like a worn leather jacket. And Jamie, my quiet-eyed friend from forensics training, held a thermos of something that smelled like warmth and caffeine and an understanding of long nights. These weren't people who needed a script. These were people who knew better than to ask if I was okay. They just handed me peace, one glance at a time. I thought you might want to disappear after, Lila said gently, offering me a coat from the back seat of her car. I nodded, taking it, my voice slow and even. No. I've disappeared enough. I want to feel this one. We didn't go to some flashy bar or rooftop lounge. No champagne towers. No curated Instagram posts with preloaded captions like "Justice served" or "Truth always wins." We drove to the quiet diner near the edge of town that had never once asked for a reservation. The kind of place where the waitstaff just poured your coffee without questions and left you alone unless you looked like you needed saving. We slid into a corner booth. The vinyl stuck slightly to the back of my thighs, and the Formica table was chipped in the corner. I have never loved a place more. Jamie passed me the thermos. "Thought about bringing wine," she said, "but I figured you'd want your hands warm and your eyes sharp." I smiled for the first time that night. It wasn't performative. It wasn't a mask. It was just real. We didn't toast to revenge. We didn't raise glasses or stand on chairs or dramatize what had already spoken for itself. We passed syrup and sugar. We broke pancakes with plastic knives. We sat in shared silence until someone cracked a joke about Dev's inability to properly butter toast, and then we laughed not because we needed to break the tension, but because it was simply time to laugh again. No one asked if I forgave my sister. No one asked if I planned to go to therapy. No one pushed healing down my throat like it was a finish line I was obligated to sprint toward now that the fight was over. They let me be. That, in itself, was the gift. But silence has a way of surfacing the things you haven't said yet, and somewhere between the second refill of lukewarm coffee and the smell of grilled cheese on the neighboring table, I felt it rise in me, not like rage this time, but like clarity. Like something sacred and earned. "Marissa made me the villain," I said, not to them, but to the booth, to the night itself. Because if I was the villain, they all got to keep being the heroes. Dev leaned back, nodding slowly. "But the thing about lies," he said, "they've all got shelf lives. Expiration dates," Jamie added. "Even the fancy ones with glitter and professional framing." Lila reached for my hand. Her palm was warm. Her grip wasn't tight. It didn't need to be. "And when they rot," she said softly, "they do it fast." We stayed for another hour. The waitress, Tammy, according to her name tag, slipped me a slice of apple pie on the house. I didn't ask why. Maybe she'd seen the news already. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she just saw something on my face that told her I'd finally dropped something heavy, and I deserved something light to carry home instead. When we finally stood up to leave, I stepped outside into the cool dawn air and realized something vital. There were no apologies I was waiting for anymore. Not from my parents. Not from the relatives who stared at their feet while I was being crucified in public. Not from the friends who quietly disappeared when things got too complicated. I didn't need their repair attempts. I didn't need their sudden amnesia about who said what and when and to whom. I didn't need the long emails that would probably arrive in the coming days, emails with subject lines like, "Can we talk?" or "I had no idea," or "I never meant to hurt you." They could keep them. Because here's the truth that sits in your spine when you finally stopped asking to be loved by the wrong people. You don't owe anyone access to the life you had to build after they watched you bleed and looked away. Forgiveness is personal, but access is a privilege. And some people lost it the moment they watched my world collapse and chose silence as their shelter. In the weeks that followed, I received texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. One of them used the phrase "really eye-opening," as if my public crucifixion had been a TED Talk. Another left a voicemail crying about how she felt manipulated by Marissa too, and always had a weird feeling about that email. I didn't respond. I didn't block them either. Let them sit with the silence they gave me when I needed a voice. That's the closest thing to justice some people will ever understand. My mother sent a card. Handwritten. No return address. Just a single page that read, "We failed you. I failed you. I see it now. I'm sorry. I hope someday you can let us show you that we still love you." I didn't shred it. I didn't weep. I placed it gently into a folder marked history. Not trash. Not forgiveness. Just a record. A receipt from the era I no longer belonged to. Marissa never reached out. Of course she didn't. Her downfall was quiet. She deactivated social media within 2 days. The man she'd left Thomas for posted a vague quote about toxic lies and truth surfacing the day after the party. I heard through a friend of a friend that she lost her brand deal, that her job went on pause, that she's considering a move out of state. I hope she does. Let her start over. Let her try again. I don't care. Because I'm not chasing closure anymore. I became it. There's something liberating about no longer being haunted by the version of yourself they tried to bury. About sitting at a cafe without wondering who still believes you were a traitor. About smiling when someone says your name and not worrying if they remember it with a question mark or a period. I live in a small place now. Nothing grand. Nothing curated. Just sunlight, books, and a lock on the door that I paid for with my own name. I wake up early. I drink my coffee slowly. I go to sleep without checking who still follows me online. And once a week, I meet with my people, my chosen family. We don't sit in church pews or at mahogany banquet tables. We sit on my living room floor with takeout containers and playlists that aren't trying to impress anyone. We toast, not to perfection, not to legacy, but to presence, to truth, to the people who stayed. And sometimes, when I sit alone in the quiet after they've gone, I remember the silence of that bridal suite. The absence of footsteps from the people who were supposed to love me first. The feeling of the veil on my shoulders like a lie I had agreed to wear. And then I remember the moment I took it off, walked away, and built something else. They made me the villain because it let them keep the story neat. But stories told in silence never end where they begin. They don't get to call me bitter. They don't get to call me dramatic. They don't get to call me anything anymore. Because this, every step, every truth, every scar turned armor, this is my story now. And I am finally, entirely, unapologetically the author. They made me the villain so they could stay the heroes, but every lie has a shelf life. Subscribe for more stories where silence ends and the real story begins.